morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Chicago Board of Elections regular board meeting of April 14th, 2020. If at any time during this call you need assistance, please press *0 for the operator. This call is being recorded. I will now like to turn the conference over to Marisel Hernandez, Chair of the Chicago Board of Elections. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We will call to order the regular board meeting of the Board of Election Commissioners for the City of Chicago via audio. We have with us Commissioners William Kresse and Jonathan Swain. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of the agenda. Are there any proposed edits or changes? If not, we will move to the next item, which is the approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of January 28, 2020. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved by Commissioner Swain.
Is there a second?
Seconded by Commissioner Kresse.
All those in favor?
Aye. Kresse.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next is the Executive Director's report. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Just to give heads up or let everybody know that as of today, we're mailing out all the judges of election checks. That's approximately $2.2 million worth of checks going out. We will be sending out on Thursday election day workers and polling places. We've already sent out early voting checks, and election coordinators will be going out also. So we're moving full speed ahead on that. Other items are, there's still approximately 1,600 supply carriers still need to be, that are locked down, that need to be picked up and brought to our warehouse. All of our vendors, as you know, Peter Peso, our finance director, is here. All of our vendors are being paid. Everybody's working to make sure everybody gets paid who worked this past election. Also, just to let you know, excuse me, I sent you some information from Jim Sievers, who is the Vice President of Runback, who we purchased our Gillis machine to talk about vote by mail, to see what we would need to do. Right now we're doing, what did we do, Jim? About 118,000 vote by mail. We're looking at what happens if we did, 800,000. He informed me that the machine that we have now will handle over 500,000. We're looking at the capabilities of moving that up, so we started early on that. We are working on with Dominion. I told them there were some things that need to be changed for this last election. They're going into for these changes and deliver those to the State Board of Elections so they can be approved. We found some items that we need to work on. We have a list of about 13 that I sent out to everybody, and staff is working on that as we speak. I spoke to Ms. Agnew today about reviewing some other documents. I'm going to be calling Ms. Wall to let her know about materials that we need for the November election. Mailing envelopes, masks, gloves, which I think we have enough of those, but face masks, and we're looking at acrylic shields for all of our early voting sites. We have those supply carriers that we work at. We're looking at putting up acrylic shields. So we're doing everything possible to get ready for the November election. There are some questions that we still have to ask the legislature, but just to let you know, the board is working full speed ahead. Charles?
Lance, before you go on, Commissioner Swain, I have a few questions.
Yes, sir.
Okay. These carriers, these 1,500 carriers that we still have out in the field, primarily, where are they?
They're in locked in schools and some parks and libraries.
Okay. Why can't we get them?
Because they're not letting anybody into those locations yet. A lot of those areas are being scrubbed down.
We had conversations with facilities and schools and whatever the department is for the or parks and all those folks to let them know that we have them in there and we need to get them out.
Yes, we did, and we are working on them. We've gotten most of them out, but we have a place called, and there's some private areas also that aren't going to do that until the quarantine's lifted. They're not letting us in until the quarantine's lifted.
Okay, you saying most of them, but 1,600 is a lot, right? Out of 2,000 precincts.
No, 116.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard 1,600.
No, one.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, that changed the tenor of my question. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
That's my first question. Second question: vote by mail. Adam, just to refresh my recollection, it is the state legislature that has to approve that. If people wanted a vote by mail, election, right?
Yeah, well, right now everybody is entitled to a vote by mail ballot. You don't have to have a reason. It's not absentee anymore. But if we wanted to have the ability, for example, to send out ballots to all registered voters, that is something we would need legislative remedy for. Yeah.
Okay, so
to shut down precincts. I mean, yes.
Okay, so in order, if we wanted to send out a vote by mail, just without application, the legislature has to approve that, right?
That is correct, and that is something I was planning to talk about later. Point being that with 1.5 to 1.8 million registered voters, and we tend to see about a 70% or more turnout in the presidential elections, we're talking over 1 million applications for ballots, and so it would be substantially administratively easier for us to not have to process more than 1 million applications. And yes, we would need legislative changes in order to be able to just send out everybody a ballot who's already registered without.
Okay, okay. So again, because it's the choice of the legislature, let's presume for a second that the legislature, for purposes of my question, let's just presume that they are going to approve a completely vote by mail election. For purposes of my question, are we putting together a timeline and a memo of some sort that details all the things that go into that, so that legislators can be informed of when the kind of dates final are for us to be able to implement that?
We're working on that. In fact, I sent you the thing from Jim Severs this morning. He's one of the guys that knows about vote by mail. That his equipment is developed for that.
Okay, so I guess what I'm suggesting is that we need to put together some kind of memorandum so that we have a real sense of what it would take to do if we get the call to say we have to do all of that.
Okay.
So, Commissioner Swain, this is Adam. We've obtained information, and we've had conversations and obtained pretty detailed analysis from our mail house and from our printer as to what the additional demands are placed on them. Those are obviously some big factors that go into the scheduling on that. Gary Rescission and our ballot, the coordinators have also chimed in. And so, yeah, we're working to pull all that information together.
Okay, that's fine. So I would recommend that we put together a memo to the commissioners so we can all review it in total. And I would like to understand what all it would take to make that shift. And then secondly, that we can communicate that to the state legislature should they want to do that. Again, it's their decision. Should they want to do that, that they're informed about what the time-sensitive dates are. So that's my second point. My third point is how early can people apply for vote? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, can I just interrupt because I have a follow-up question on the vote by mail, Commissioner Swain?
Yeah, go ahead.
And my concern is it is so much more. Following up on Commissioner Swain's comments, it is so much more than just vote by mail, because if we have vote by mail, I think the whole point would be to vastly reduce the number of precinct polling places for the November election and have the early voting, maintain the early voting sites, maybe do a larger vote center during this process. And I'm very, very concerned that we're trying to put a plan together at this time that has so many variables. And in order to properly plan for this election without the state legislature's early input and action, it's going to be extremely difficult to figure out exactly what we're doing and the direction we're going to go. So I think that we need to reach out to the leaders of our state and explain this all to them. And really, this affects every election jurisdiction throughout the state. We just happen to be the largest. But I'm very, very concerned about what the legislature is thinking of doing, not thinking of doing, what eventually will occur and when. We don't have many months to go for this election. So those are just my comments.
And I'd echo those, and I'll add. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, okay, thank you. I was going to say, I think Commissioner Swain was getting the idea that, you know, under current law, when is the earliest that someone can request a vote by mail ballot?
Yeah, that was my next question. Yeah. That was my next question.
Anybody have that answer?
Give me a minute.
Okay. If I still have the floor, Jonathan, if you'd be so kind, I'd also like to say I read the material that was sent out. Again, let's not assume that it will be sort of the all or nothing. That will be we mail out a ballot to all, 1,000,004 voters. I think you will see a lot of pushback on that, and frankly, I'm concerned about that as well. Just having, that many live ballots out there when we know the turnout would be a lot less. Well, under the current law, as I understand, we could still say mail out information to every voter about how to vote by mail, how they can apply to vote by mail. To send something back to us, a request for a vote by mail ballot. We can do that on our own right now under current law, and I think with all the talk about vote by mail and from what's going on in their lives, I think you would see over 50% of our voters would probably respond to that. And we could, so I would like that option as one of the, possible options in any kind of contingency planning and costing out of how we proceed.
There are several, Commissioner, this is Lance. There are several options that we do need to run by, and that's what we're working on right now.
And Commissioners, this is Adam. You can apply for a vote by mail ballot up to as many as 90 days ahead of the election. That would be about August 5th would be the start.
August 5th?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the so the reason I raised the issue about an all or nothing is because we don't control the decision, the legislature does, and so I want to make sure that we are prepared from a planning point of view if it is all or nothing, right? I'm not voicing any opinion about what it should be. I think we need to be prepared that if it's all, we know what it is if it's just status quo. we need to be thoughtful about what it is if it's all. But I do think, in line with the chair, I do think that Lance is a part of this. We need to think what our kind of best case, middle case, and worst case scenarios are. That in terms of our ability to what we can do from an operational point of view, from a potential staffing point of view, from a logistical point of view, we need to have a real sense of that, like that we can speak to that to anyone that asks intelligently. And I'm sure you're working on that.
Yes, we are working on that.
Okay.
Commissioner Kresse,
I'm sorry, I have one more point, Bill. And my last point is that the August 5th deadline, we need to be thinking about prior to that deadline throughout the summer, how, because again, people can apply for a vote by mail application throughout the summer. So we can, regardless of what the legislature does, we can publicize that people can apply for a vote by mail, so we can get a sense as to what the kind of reaction is to that. Because even if they stay status quo on what in terms of us sending it out, we still might have a lot more demand than we're prepared to deal with.
Commissioner Kresse here. Jonathan, it's like you're reading my mind. I was going to suggest that with the August 5 date that we consider mailing out postcards to all voters the first week of August with the instructions on how to request a vote by mail, and I think that would be a great way of just getting a temperature of the water for vote by mail. I think we will find that we have a phenomenal response to that.
Because Lance, you said the agility machine can process how much? 500,000?
No, I was talking to Jim Stevers, the machine that we have now. I asked him what about buying a second one. He says, just to let you know that places that do large volume, like California, like San Francisco, only has one that does the whole city of San Francisco. He says the machine is capable of doing over 500,000. There's some throughput that I'd like to talk to him about, but I want to be prepared for the worst case scenario, that if we had to mail out and receive a ballot from every single voter. So that's what I'm preparing for.
And let's not, okay, and this is Commissioner Hernandez. The other thing that has always been on my mind, and especially now, is the health and safety of not only the voters, but of all those great people who volunteer and come to work for the board during these times. And in light of what we have heard recently of those individuals, those brave individuals who have, and we don't know if they contracted the COVID-19 virus before, during, or after they worked for the board. But regardless, it's something that we need to keep in mind for the November election, and I hope the legislature keeps in mind that we need to minimize any similar issues for the November election.
And we're working on that too, Madam Chair, from this end.
Okay. Now, I think we were discussing Mr. Goff's report. Mr. Goff, are you done with your report at this time?
Yes, I have items in writing that I will send it to the board members, so that will be coming soon.
Okay.
Commissioner Kresse, if I may, Lance, did you want to say any words about the news report for the last day with regards to the death of the one poll worker and the others we have reports on?
Well, I think the chair said that very eloquently. You know, the worst thing that could happen, and what I feel been keeping me awake tonight, people in the polling place and what's happening to them, and my staff. The staff is still coming in working, even though we have a quarantine order, but they consider this critical infrastructure, and God bless them for doing that. We just want to make sure that we're going to be doing everything possible to make everybody safe. Also, I'm working right now with, I've sent letters to we're sending letters to all the nursing homes so we can get applications into those people's hands earlier than later, and all the senior buildings. So we're looking at the people that are more vulnerable than anything else. So we're working on that right now.
Okay.
Thank you, Lynn.
We will proceed with Mr. Holliday. Do you have any further reports?
Yes, Madam Chair and fellow commissioners. As Lance has mentioned, all payrolls have been processed or being processed, but I just want to take this time to thank the employees, Audrey Lewicki with the community service and the language translators, Paulino with the judges, Tim Carley, the registration department, the HR with the recruiting early voting judges, John Powell, the training of the early voting judges and overseeing that whole process, Matt Lynn and the IT department, along with Dominion Voting System, and more especially to Alex Soto Vasquez, the team lead with the implementation of our new system. As Lance spoke, yeah, there are some things we need to take care of with that, but in the whole, he did an outstanding job with the presentation and the training of our staff. Clint Hurd, pre-election voting. My hat's off to Brandon Pickens and the polling place department with the changing of polling places at the last moment, the cartage and all. And a special thanks to Sandra Spare and her vote by mail team, our purchasing, Opal Walls and her staff with Sherry and Amanda for working and getting us the needed supplies and taking care of all the POs that the office had. Peter Pesos in the finance department with Jesus and Mary Carmen for keeping our bills paid and keeping us aware of what needed to be paid. To Myrna Webb, Kathy Ross, Yvonne Jones for their support that they gave the office, and Lance, to Trish Sheehy for the outstanding job that she does and continuously doing. Keith Carter and the warehouse staff. Then I would like to take this time to thank my team for the obvious discrepancy and the 5%, the work that they did on that. Joan Agnew, Ron Boyd, my assistant Cassandra Molina, for all that they did for that. And to Gary Revision, our ballot preparation contractor, Dean Fatigues for what he does at the warehouse and securing our super site, and Sue Casey, who's our contractor with our East Over. I just want to thank them. That's the gist of what I have to say today because Lance has said it all. I spoke to Lance earlier this morning. I just, had some concerns about the reporting of the death of the worker. In some cases, the media kind of didn't really put it out there the way it was, the way it is. The board sent out a letter to let the individuals know in these precincts that someone had tested positive. But the way it's reported this morning is that the board sent out a letter that a worker had died from this, and that wasn't the gist of that letter. So I guess when reporting to the media and things, we got to just try to make sure that they get it right and put it out there the way that it has happened and not the way that they see it. So that's all I have at the moment for today.
Thank you. If there's no further comments or questions for Mr. Holliday, we'll proceed with the Communications Director, Mr. Allen.
Good morning. I would echo Charles's remarks and also add a lot of thanks to our vote-by-mail vendor.
Mr. Allen, I think you're still on mute.
No, it may be that the speaker system.
Okay, we'll get Mr. Allen right now, and we'll go into old business. I think we've discussed infrastructure projects and changes in election administration, of voting equipment. Anything new with electronic poll books?
Nothing at the moment.
Legislation, I think we've discussed that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kresse here. On legislation, Adam, if you're on, I'd like to see if Adam had anything more to add to that.
Well, as Commissioner Swain and others have pointed out, as we head into this November, we don't know what the election is going to look like yet. We don't know what the legislature is going to choose as for how it's going to look in the state of Illinois. And so we are working on different contingencies. I think that we do need to communicate very clearly with the legislative leaders, because there's already a lot of state representatives and state senators who are talking about proposing bills for various election procedural matters. But there needs to be, I think, well, obviously at the end of the day, there needs to be a full agreement throughout the legislature, and hopefully they'll work with us on that. We have been in communication with the Cook County Clerk's office and also DuPage County and Lake counties throughout this primary season. Those I do believe being the 4 largest election jurisdictions in the state. And the 4 of us have been sharing a lot of the same issues, of course, and a lot of the same problems that we have to overcome. So we've talked about vote by mail. One of the other legislative pushes that we will make, though, is if we're going to have this much vote by mail, we should also have secure drop boxes, the ability for people to drop their ballots off at designated areas throughout the city, therefore not having to rely on the post office and just making it nice and easy for them. We're also talking about if the legislature is going to keep any sort of in-person precincts open for election day, then having seen the way it was for us with closures in March, we know that the closures will likely be just as bad, if not worse, in November. We need to prepare for that anyway. So it would be nice to have legislation that allows for the universal early voting sites to remain open on election day. That was a real game changer and lifesaver for this board on March 17th. And so we would like to see that not only be able to happen again, but perhaps expand it into the full universal vote center model that we've been, that the board has been desiring. And of course, the private polling places are most likely to not let us in, and so we need to focus on schools. So another aspect is please have schools shut down for election day, and we might have to rely on them for voting, universal voting sites as well. And then there's issues related to the follow-up and fulfillment of vote by mail. You know, the signature verification process with what would be such an incredible increase in the amount of vote by mail, the signature verification process would need to be modernized. We need to gather phone numbers and email addresses so we can very quickly communicate with voters about any problems that come with their signatures. And we'd like some legislation that allows for updated signature samples, known exemplars that we can continue to update in the system so that we're not consistently looking back to the original registration signature that becomes 30, 40, 50 years old. So those are some of the issues. This is all in the works, and we're definitely reaching out to the legislative leaders as soon as we can coordinate our efforts with other interested election authorities.
Adam, if I may again, Commissioner Kresse, and not to put more stuff on your plate. First of all, thank you for the work you've done to date, especially, the early voting sites were supposed to be closed on election day under the law, but we were able to go into court, get an injunction to keep those open. And as you say, that was a game changer and a lifesaver. Secondly, let's also think about deadlines and dates post-election day, because if we're going to be getting a lot of returns on vote by mail, it's going to take a lot of time to process all of that before we can certify the election. So if we can think of, push for giving us an extension before, certification of the proclamation. And third, looking up north to a state you're familiar with, a couple of friends who requested vote by mail weeks before the election, and apparently they didn't get their ballots until after election day. It might be something you can consider, that if a voter gets the requested before election day, we have some time to get the ballots out to them, and then they can get it in sometime, post-election day. I don't know, something at that end. Because again, we're going to need some additional days in order to process all of this if we go, full steam into vote by mail. Just some ideas, Adam, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear those, and I appreciate that. And we have a little bit of wiggle room in the canvass proclamation period already, because we're only allowed to accept the ballots for 2 weeks, but then there's the 3-week canvass proclamation period. So we're just so good about it that we've tended to not need much of that last week. But that is certainly something that we're looking into, is whether we would need additional time, and can we get that without, here now we've got a national election results to have to deal with. So we have to look into when the federal government needs the results of the senator, congressman, and presidential election. But as much time as we can buy, we'll certainly request that this needs.
And on the front end, Adam, we've also talked about the problems we've had with holding hearings when there have been objections to candidates on the ballot. We've issued our decision, but then those parties do have the right to go to court and contest our decision. And sometimes we run up against, deadlines for issuing our ballots. So we also have to think about that in asking the legislature to possibly give us some more breathing room and move those dates, right?
On the one hand, yes, indeed. The problem there is that we're already within the 90-day petition circulation period for the independent candidates.
Exactly.
So it's almost too late, because you'd have to cut into if you're going to move up their filing deadline, then you'd have to cut into their 90-day period in a time frame where I don't even know how you circulate petitions right now, frankly. But indeed, the good news is that this is only the independent candidate cycle. We're going to have substantially fewer objections, if any. In the last midterms, we didn't even have any, I believe. So hopefully with a low volume of objections, we will get this particular November ballot figured out in a good, timely fashion.
Adam,
but it is a system that needs to be fixed all around, yes.
Right.
But Adam, can I interject here for a second? And I have not stayed up current on the police district recommendations that city council is contemplating. Admittedly, I'm not fully up to speed on what that is right now, but if that is passed, then you would have potentially a lot of objections going on now, right? Essentially, for all those police district seats for the police oversight board or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Is that for November?
For November, yeah. I think last time my conversation was that was going to be contemplated for November being on the ballot. Am I right about that, Adam?
I think we might have lost him.
That was something.
Yeah.
That was something that.
Can't lose Adam.
Yeah. He'll call in again.
Go ahead, though, Lance.
That is something that it's up to the mayor to do with city council. So that hasn't been done yet. But if it is done, we'll be working on that.
So, right. So I guess the point I'm raising is, yeah, go ahead.
No, this is Charles from Swain. To your question, yes, that was one of the last conversations we had about it trying to be petitions filed for it to be put on the ballot for November. But we've had no contact or any more discussion from the mayor and the city council about this.
And I'm going to presume for a moment that that the petition's been on the COVID-19 response, but now with the fact that they're going to have a police commissioner that's going to be confirmed at least at some point in the near future, I think this conversation is a probability it will resurrect itself. So I guess the point that, to the chair's point, and to Adam's point before he jumped off, we might have a number of objections. So I think we need to think about what that process looks like too, especially if we're caught in a situation where there is another kind of stay-at-home kind of order, or potentially stay-at-home order down the road.
Right. In agreement with you, Commissioner.
So it sounds like generally you all, I mean, this is ultimately it's requiring for some kind of rewrite of the election code in some ways.
Yes, it is.
Which is forcing us to do this. It's forcing us to do that in the next, month, if you will, to come up with a real kind of framework for a rewrite of the election code to deal with this kind of situation. So, I mean, I applaud you guys got the work cut out for you, but that's real ultimately what this is really looking at.
Right. And I think I've talked to Adam Lasker about and Joan Agnew getting something together and going through the election code and seeing exactly what would need to be amended for various reasons, because there's things in the election code that are so antiquated that even if we maintain, the same election routine, the same election process, there's still things that need to be changed and bring it up to the 21st century. So we'll make sure that Adam and Joan are continue to do that. Is there any further questions?
Madam Chair, just one sec.
Yes.
I don't know if the operator is still online, but Adam Lasker is attempting to dial in, and he's stuck on hold right now.
His line was actually just got from an agent, so he should be connected any moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Adam?
Hello? Okay. Hello?
Adam?
This is Adam. Sorry, guys. I got disconnected there, and then it took a while for an operator to let me back in.
Okay.
And so, Adam, now that you're back, let me reiterate briefly what I mentioned.
Yeah.
I said what we were talking about was the police legislation that has a probability of resurrecting itself before the end of the year. There was conversations, there was a talk about a November kind of election, and so there is some contemplation around objections with respect to that. So we need to be thinking through what that looks like, and especially if we can't do objections in person for some reason, what it would look like for us to do kind of virtual objections if we had to do that. So that's another element of this. I just want you to make sure you guys are consistent as you're thinking through the kind of this kind of forced rewriting of code.
Yeah, those are very good points. And I just at about a quarter to midnight last night, I received an email from one of the people who's working on the GAPA project. They said that the ordinance was supposed to be at the March City Council meeting. Of course, City Council shut down, but they apparently are still thinking about moving forward with it. Their question to me was, how do you meet the signature requirement trying to circulate petitions during a pandemic like this? I don't have answers for that.
Well,
but
and
I think our electoral.
Go ahead.
Our electoral board rules are one way that we're going to have to really consider if we're still having to do social distancing during that objection period. I think the electoral board rules of procedure are going to have to be overhauled somewhat substantially.
I just don't know how we can proceed with petitions at this point. If the city council passes an ordinance and still try to deal with, mail ballots and getting everything together. So I would hope that they would take that into account.
As I follow up with them, well, can I just respond real quick, Commissioner Kresse?
Yes, please.
To the chair? Okay, so they're requesting, a little bit of for me on the petition circulation process, and frankly, it's like it's too late now. I mean, they're already eating into the 90-day period that they're supposed to have in a time where I don't even know how you circulate petitions right now anyway, and of course those same issues are facing all of the independent candidates at the moment. So, yeah, it would be nice if they can hold off, but I obviously don't know whether they will.
Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner Kresse here. Adam, isn't there litigation that's been filed? I know former Governor Quinn was involved with that might also address these issues.
Well, Governor Quinn has filed a lawsuit on referendum signature requirements, making the same arguments that would apply we're hearing from independent candidates, which is the signature requirements have not changed, but the society in which we circulate petitions has at least temporarily changed. And his complaint is dealing with referendum signature requirements. I do think that if he's successful with getting a court to do some sort of judgment on that, even though it sounds a little bit like a legislative issue, but nonetheless, if a court does weigh in on that, that would be a very strong argument for the independent candidates as well as any of the nonpartisan candidates, independent candidates for the police board.
Thank you, Adam.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, let's move to new business. And the first item is the approval of a legal services agreement with the law firm Ritter for representation in the matter of Rela versus Cook County Officers Electoral Board. Mr. Lasker, do you have any comments on this?
Well, only that I have not found any evidence that the board's actually been served with this lawsuit. It was filed in November. I was shortly before the March primary made aware of the lawsuit itself. It's been ongoing. The county had actually erroneously filed an appearance on behalf of the Board of Elections, which I wasn't aware of at the time, but they've now taken that away. So the point is, I think that we need to get the outside counsel lined up and ready to go and start talking with the lawyer about getting us served and we can make our appearance.
Or that would be an objection, a basis for a motion to dismiss. So are there any further comments, questions regarding this? If not, is there a motion to approve a legal services agreement with the law firm of Ritter Burns at the rate of $295 an hour for representation in the matter of Rela versus Cook County Officers Electoral Board?
Commissioner Kresse, so moved.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Swain, second.
All those in favor?
Commissioner Kresse, aye.
Commissioner Swain votes aye.
Motion passes. The second item is the A request for approval to exercise a one-year option to extend the agreement with J.J. Collins for printing and the mailing of household pre-election materials. Now, we have a contract already.
Yes, we do.
And
Yes.
we would be exercising the first option to renew this contract in the amount of $70,500 for the printing and mailing for the February 2020 household.
The contract was originally for February. It would now be for November. Yeah.
Okay. And the contract. I'm sorry?
Ms. Walls, are you on?
I am. Yes, Board Chair, this is for the exercising of the first option to renew the contract for the household pre-election mailing for the upcoming November general election. This contract was originally approved back in January of this year for the February 2020 election mailing, and we're using the same contract with the same terms and conditions. I've spoken to Mike Pickstrom at J.J. Collins, and he is in agreement with those terms and conditions, as well as the cost. And we will utilize this contract, if you approve, for the November general election. The contract term will begin April 1st of 2020 and expire March 31st of 2021, with an additional one-year option remaining in that contract, if you so approve.
Okay. And so would the amount be $70,500, Opal?
It is for the exact amount of $70,500. If in fact that amount is less on the invoice, of course we would pay the lesser amount. But it is up to and not to exceed the amount of $70,500.
Just as a side note, I think we're going to have to come back and revisit this because of what we were just talking about sending out probably an additional one or two more mailings to households, given the circumstances.
Madam Chair, excuse me, there will be several mailings that we're going to have to do, so.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
We may have to go out for a formal bid, depending on the specifications of those mailings and if they were addressed within this bid that was issued back last year. So we may have to do some additional IFCs in the future for the November election.
Okay. Are there any further questions or comments regarding this? If not, is there a motion to approve the 1 year option to extend the agreement with J.J. Collins for the printing and mailing of household pre-election materials in the amount of $70,500?
Moved by Commissioner Swain.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Kresse, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Commissioner Swain votes aye.
Okay. Thank you. And the motion passes.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the legal report. Mr. Lasker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to let everybody know that yesterday we received a petition for a discovery recount in the 12th Ward Democratic Ward Committee person race. The petition was filed by Antonio, or on behalf of Tony Munoz, who received 2,780 votes, which is 20 votes fewer than George Cardenas. So when the warehouse and the board staff is ready, we will commence with those discovery recount procedures. This will involve 5 precincts.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Any questions, any further questions of Mr. Lasker, commissioners? If not, we'll proceed with the next item. We do not have a financial report. We do have, I believe, public comment. Joanna?
Thank you. Your public comment comes from Kara Maher. Your line is now open. Please go ahead.
Okay, Ms. Maher, good morning.
Good morning. I'm going to go really fast because I have a whole bunch of items. One, I challenge you on whether or not you are in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. You did not publicize this toll-free number on your website or the agenda published. Oh, you indicated that it was being held at 69 West Washington. Also, there's a city council meeting tomorrow, by the way. Early voting. John Powell is awesome. I challenge you, though, on whether you need an armed investigator. I believe it is unnecessary, unwise, and dangerous to have an armed investigator who is open carrying a gun in polling places for early voting. There's no clear role for them in the polling place. There's no clear instructions on their behavior. I wonder if there's a background check performed on these people. There's no training for them on de-escalation, and there's no repercussions for their bad behavior, as you still have an investigator on the books for someone that sexually harassed myself and another worker during early voting a couple of years ago, and he is still on the job. Also, staffing for early voting. If you are going to, I really challenge you on allowing people to have a day off for early voting. Not only are they working every day, they're now going to be required to work election day, which is too many days in a row, too long with no day off. And especially because you have many elderly working as early voting workers, I think you're really making a mistake by not providing a better work environment for them. Also, on MIS and your website for early voting, you are clearly being beaten by Cook County on both of those. You need to publish daily numbers on results, on responses, so people can see where the volume is, so they can decide which early voting site to go to. Your website is outdated, clunky, and not user-friendly, and should publish final results by channel: early voting, vote by mail, and election day. And I know my time is up, but I have other issues. So,
Thank you, Ms. Maher. Is there, Joanna, is there anybody else for public comment?
There are no further public comments.
Commissioners have rejoined the phone call on a separate line. This is Jim Allen, and the phone I was on is also providing for the speaker system for the videotaping of the meeting. And just to follow up on some of the earlier remarks, I apologize for it wasn't muted, it just wouldn't pick up my voice. But in terms of the planning for November, Mr. Goff has asked me to prepare some schedules and timelines, and one other consideration that did not come up in the earlier discussions is the canvass. Normally we would perform the canvass right about 90 days before Election Day, which would be in early August. However, with the likelihood of a large vote-by-mail participation number, we would probably need to accelerate the schedule for the canvass to, at the very latest, early July, and also utilize that as a means of gathering more emails and providing more information about the option for vote by mail based on what the legislature does in the coming month. So we're working up two different timelines, as Commissioner Swain suggested, and Commissioner Kresse also, that there be like an option A and an option B, so that we're ready to deal with either mailing out applications as opposed to mailing out ballots.
I think one of the things that we need to address is the fact that our most underserved communities don't have a computer and internet. And so their only way of requesting a mail ballot would be by calling in. And I would like all of you to explore ways that we can maximize participation to our underserved communities, recognizing that they don't have these things. And in addition, for some, there is the language barrier. And I know we send out mailing in various languages, but we need to figure out what to do. We need to partner, be more aggressive in partnering with community organizations, with places of worship, with all of these organizations out there, to get the word out that people can call in and request a vote by mail ballot. Okay?
Yes, Madam Chair, understood.
Okay. Okay.
I concur, with, Madam Chair, Commissioner Kresse, I concur with your concerns there. Just for the record, Jim, if somebody does call in and request and ask for a request for ballot form, is that mailed out and with return postage paid?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. I just wanted that for the record.
Yeah, I think that's very important, and that's one of the things that we do that a lot of other states and electoral jurisdictions don't do. So that is very good. But I'm still concerned that maybe we're not getting the news out to certain communities, and I think we have to go the extra mile and see how we can work on this and get
Madam Chair, can I add one more point to that? I appreciate you raising the comment about underserved communities. Reports have said that between 1/3 to 1/2 of Black households that have a child under 18 do not have broadband internet. So I appreciate you raising that concern. What I will say though is that most African Americans internet access is through their phones, and so in addition to what you're talking about, I think we need to look to figure out how our website is mobilely optimized specifically for the vote by mail ballot, so that it can be simply done on a smartphone. Because I do know that people that do not have internet access at home still have access to smartphones.
That's a very good idea.
We did have that capacity at this past election, and I think it helped us with the rather large number of applications that we were able to process.
Yes. And it will be for November.
Okay. Is there a need for executive session, Mr. Lasker? Mr. Lasker?
Sorry, mute button. Not today, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. If not, if there's no other comments or questions, and once again, this co-worker who passed away, and has been on my mind, and I wish to send, on behalf of the board, I know, and all of our employees, our heartfelt condolences to his family, and it will be our number one priority, continuing with this election as it was with this primary, to keep everyone safe and healthy. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn to our next regularly scheduled meeting?
Commissioner Kresse, I move to adjourn to our next regularly scheduled meeting or at the call of the chair.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Swain, second.
All those in favor?
Commissioner Kresse, aye.
Mr. Swain votes aye.
Motion passes, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.